and they can't be taken from you. There's a few parts, but the part about immigration, about birthright citizenship, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Okay. And it goes on, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities, that sort of thing.
What
liberty,
word's important
due
there?
Process. Jurisdiction.
Okay.
Right?
What does that mean?
They could have said all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States, but they didn't. They say, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Jurisdiction in this context back in, 1868, I think, is when it was written, not borders. It doesn't mean like when you think of like the local police jurisdiction, right, being the city limits or whatever it is. It's an allegiance thing. Because you remember,
sort of under the authority of, or
so
governed by.
For instance, the Native Americans, when the Constitution was written, what Article 1, Section whatever, which 2, right? I don't remember, but
you're the scholar.
I know. I went to school for years, like Obama did for this. Yeah. No, I didn't. But it excluded Native Americans.
Why?
At the time, because they had an allegiance to their own tribe or whatever.
So they were under the jurisdiction of the tribe.
And not of the United States.
Because they were considered a sovereign
Absolutely.
nation.
Further, and this is interesting because this guy's from Michigan.
But okay.
What? Go ahead.
Well, Indian law is complex and crazy. I mean, it's almost impossible to understand it, but they are sovereign to the extent that they are controlled by the federal governments in many ways.
Well, now I mean they changed that. They made them citizens. They realized that was probably wrong.
Right.
That they
so they're quasi sovereign now. I think,
sure.
But anyways, at that time, so they couldn't be their children were not considered citizens of the United States.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And it's confusing because it doesn't say explicitly in there. Unless you're here illegally, right? It doesn't say that.
Right.
Jacob Howard, he was a Republican from Michigan,
Yeah.
which is interesting. He's one of the authors of the 14th Amendment and of this birthright clause. And I think, again, this was 1868. It was right after the Civil War, a few years, whatever.
Yeah.
He wrote...
This
in
is his writing.
And this was in... which paper? Globe something. A newspaper. He wrote this explaining the 14th Amendment and why it was written. Every person born within the limits of the United States and subject to their jurisdiction.
So there it separates it. Again, it's
is
not a border.
By virtue of natural law, a national law, a citizen of the United States. Okay. This will not, of course, because he thinks this is obvious.
Yeah.
This will not, of course, include persons born in the United States who are foreigners, aliens who belong to the families of ambassadors, or foreign ministers accredited to the government of the United States, but will include every other class of persons. So in his explanation of what was written at the time it was written,
and what they meant,
what they really meant by this was it will not include people born in the United States who are foreigners or aliens, meaning
or illegals.
You're here illegal. That's what alien is, right? Foreigner would be.
There's legal aliens and there's illegal aliens,
and then there's like ET aliens,
right? Then there's extraterrestrial aliens.
So what's the difference between a foreigner and an alien? Because I think that's the distinction.
Well, maybe
a foreigner is somebody who's here who is not a citizen. An alien is somebody who is here illegally.
Maybe.
I could be wrong. But anyway, I think it's pretty clear that he's saying people who are not citizens of the United States.
Their kids don't become citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been doing this for years. Now, what's pretty controversial, and I don't know how you're going to manage this. I heard that Trump is saying we have to retroactively fix this problem. We have a lot of people who we are today considering citizens because their parents came across the border illegally, gave birth to them, and we gave them citizenship.
Yeah, I don't see how you can do that. It's going to have to be grandfathered in.
Why?
It would become a moral issue nationwide.
Well,
worldwide.
On. That's the argument.
I know, but
that's the argument today.
You can't go back and do that.
Is that having an open border is a moral issue? I mean, that's the argument.
I know, but if you're going to crack down and actually go by what this is written, I don't think you can go back 100 years and say this 80-year-old guy that was born from illegal parents now has to leave.
Yeah,
I mean it just wouldn't fly.
Yeah, and
even it would just be there would be too much sympathy. People would be sympathetic to that.
Yeah,
here's a guy that's worked his whole life, raised his family. He's got great grandkids that are citizens now. What do we do? Are we going to kick all of them out? I don't think they can do that. They're going to have to say, on this date, anybody born after that date is not a U.S. citizen.
Yeah, and
that's the only.
That's probably the
only.
The only reasonable way to do it. I don't know. I really don't know.
I just. This is not going to fly anyways, but that certainly wouldn't fly. There'd be riots and there would be.
You don't think that it'll fly to get rid of birthright citizenship?
Yeah.
The Supreme Court's never ruled on it.
Well,
which is surprising.
Yeah, why? I don't know why. Well, I'll tell you why. Because for whatever reason, the government wants illegal aliens. I told you, I could stop it in 6 months.
Yeah? What's your plan? Here, I'll pull up Trump's plan and see
all right.
how it lines up.
For the first month, I would announce that anyone that attempts to cross the border will be summarily shot and killed. Okay, that's the first thing. And then you have to shoot some people and kill them. Women, children, men. You kill them. And then word gets back
Just
real
any
quick.
people or
anybody that's trying to come across, anybody's on the fence, coming across that border, you gun them down.
So there would be a fence.
Well, there are fences in some areas. Otherwise, they're just rivers and stuff. So people coming across.
Okay.
And you're only going to have to shoot a few dozen.
Yeah.
Just a few dozen. Word will get out. That's very dangerous to go across the border now. That's going to stop a lot of them. Mm-hmm. The other is, you get rid of the anchor baby, right? One of the motives they come here is to have their children here.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's not going to fly.
Yeah.
Other is to cut off all aid. No schooling, no health care except for emergencies to save a life. And no schooling. What?
So
I'm going to shoot some and I'm going to save some. Yeah, I know. I get the contradiction.
Yeah, okay.
Talking about, children. Except for the ones we killed in the border.
Yeah, right.
But that's just a few. I'm not a monster.
Yeah.
All right, I'm not a monster. And then the real thing that you do. So that's going to stop almost everybody. That border is going to dry up pretty quick because there's no incentive. The other is you imprison U.S. citizens that hire illegals.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that then they can't get jobs very easily because there's going to be real consequences to hiring them.
Yeah.
So you do those types of things, and bam, you've solved your border. But
and so really, all of those things line up with Trump's written policy, except shooting people. He wants.
That's where he and I differ.
He wants to build. Yeah, right. He'd rather build a wall that stops them.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
I probably not, but it has to help.
It probably helps a little. Yeah.
I mean, because quite literally, people are just walking across.
Yeah, but that's expensive, and then there's maintenance.
Yeah, okay. So you
come around by sea.
He has a plan to make Mexico pay for it.
You haven't read the Game of Thrones, have you?
No.
They put up a 1,000-foot ice wall to block off the northern people from the southern people.
And then global warming.
No. I wish now it's only 3 feet high. and the wildlings on the north are still coming across. Because they climb it for one thing.
I think it works in Israel,
and they sail around it in another. So it's 300 miles. Well, it's 3,000 miles long, 1,000 feet high. We'd
get ourselves into another Trojan horse situation too.
Yeah. Well, that was
what a nice gift.
That was the flaw in the wall is they actually had blocked off tunnels that went through the wall so that the south people could go into the north.
Yeah.
And so those were breached. But essentially what they did is they sailed around, walls are only as good as
the guns on the other side. I mean, honestly, yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. North and South Korea.
They have a wall of sorts. Barbed wire wall.
Yeah.
They have a demilitarized zone.
Yeah, there's an area of
no man's
stay
land.
out of here.
Yeah.
And apparently the South Koreans forgot where they planted their landmines, I heard.
Yeah, that was sad.
Yeah.
Well, they fired missiles today at each other, apparently.
Yeah.
North Korea launched 1 or 2, and South Korea said, "Screw you." They launched a few
800.
dozen. Yeah,
Yeah, a couple dozen, few dozen, whatever.
2 soldiers were injured by landmines, and it didn't make it clear whether the landmines.
Well, South Korean, that was not today. That was a while ago. That's been a couple weeks or a month or something. Yeah. I don't know where the landmines were. I was joking that they were.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they were their own landmines, or if North Koreans snuck across and planted landmines, or they took a foray into North Korea and stepped on mines.
Right. Yeah. So that's. I mean, they have a similar situation, but they are shooting at each other.
Yeah, I had a friend in college who was South Korean, and they have mandatory military service. He did 2 years. And he was stationed in the demilitarized zone for, I don't know, a few months, and he said he didn't like it very much because they're shooting at each other every day. You know, the guy's going out to go to the bathroom, and they're shooting at him, you know, and
it's crazy.
You're walking from your car to the building, and you're getting shot at. So you don't hear about that because it's just like normal.
It's every day for those people.
That's not the missiles so much, but the shooting.
Yeah, right.
But I think they do that in Guantanamo when they did that with Cuba, and in Guantanamo Bay, the military base that's
it tipped over.
It didn't tip over yet. But there were hostilities there on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah,
back and forth, a harassing type of stuff. But anyways, I don't think you'd have that kind of problem with poor illegal Mexican immigrants trying to get across.
Missiles?
They probably wouldn't have missiles and landmines.
Well,
the Coyotes might.
At Fast and Furious 2, we might send rocket launchers.
Yeah. But only if we have a political agenda to try to, a narrative to create.
Right. Absolutely. So.
All right. That's that.
Maybe the last thing before we take a break.
What about my trivia question and day in history? Oh,
that's fine. You can get to that. Just hold on.
I got. You want to? Yeah, I might as well do it now.
Go ahead.
Day in history, 1940. Trotsky assassinated in Mexico. Some crazy hired killer, ice axe welding assassin, beat him, and he died the next day. Probably by Soviet leader Joseph Stalin planned it. Coincidentally, those Russians invaded Czechoslovakia today in 1968 to put down some uprising there. The Prague Spring. It's hard to protest against tanks, although the Chinese did it fairly successfully, but years later. Those are the days in history. Trivia question. Who was the only first lady that was not born in the United States? And we can answer that when we come back.
Was she a citizen?
She was not a citizen.
Really?
Well, she might have been by the time she got married, but she wasn't born in the U.S.
So her parents weren't like traveling from the U.S. and
I'm gonna get into that a little bit.
Yeah, France. Is it Eleanor?
I will say. All right, I'll give this a hint.
I don't know the answer.
Daughter of an English woman and an American man. And she was born in London. And she
that sounds like a citizen.
She was maybe, and was a he was a I don't know, shopkeeper, but what I want to say is
it like
she was raised in France.
Is it one of the obvious ones?
And I'll give you a real clue.
I mean, is it obvious?
It's pretty obvious because their family went to England to take refuge during the American Revolution.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So it's Benjamin Franklin.
It was
the third president of the United States.
Yeah. His mistress.
Because he lived in France for a while, right?
Yes, he did. He loved France.
He had skeletons they just found under his house where he lived.
Yeah.
Like actual ones.
I know.
So creepy. Okay, so since you did that really early...
but I didn't give the name, so you want me to say it after the break, or you want me to do it now?
I want you to wait until after the break. It gives people an incentive to stick around.
That's what I thought.
I would think that Kenneth Herman...
They've all left by now.
Yeah, I would think Kenneth Herman coming up after the break would be an incentive.
He might want to try to answer that question.
Recently had a successful outcome to his lawsuit against Clio area schools who were trying to stop him from open carrying in the schools. So, But what I wanted to talk about really quick, we've got about 30 seconds.
All right.
And I don't know why this is in the news unless they planned it. Regal Cinemas.
Oh, yeah. Well,
they've added, apparently recently, to their admittance policy that they might search your bags.
We can actually have ask Kenneth, his thoughts on that after he goes over the Clio case and stuff. He might talk. It's gun related, and so
they claim, right, because safety and security are a part of our everyday lives now. We're just used to TSA type crap.
See, that's what scares me. It's not so much